Clear M&C Saatchi's Global Marketing Director. I'm going to start with a question. So how many of you have dealt with chaos in your marketing roles? Everybody, pretty much. Of course you have. How many of you think COVID is the only chaos you've had to deal with? Nobody. Good. We're all on the same basis. Right, I'm going to start with a story. So 8th of March last year, my daughter was born. And Melody came into the world just before COVID. Luckily, my mum was able to come down and meet her. That was the most important part, before Boris said we weren't allowed to leave our houses. And then I had many, many months of dealing with a 3.5-year-old and an 18-month-year-old in a house and working from their bedroom. It was great. It was great. But on the 23rd of March, I went back to work after parental leave. And my chief exec, who isn't in the room, but will be in the room potentially later, he set up an all-hands call on the 23rd. And on the 23rd, he said, halfway through the meeting, look, we're obviously going to need to market differently to access growth. So Geraint's going to rewrite the marketing strategy and present back to us this Friday. It was the first I'd heard of it, which was great. But it was how we all, I think many of us, had to get through that period of time. And it got me thinking, you know, I spent quite a lot of late nights. I don't think I went to bed before 1 o'clock on any of those nights before that Friday, just scrawling different models and different ways of prioritizing and choosing the right things to do to try and map a pathway out of the chaos that we're all facing. And I spent a lot of time talking to our Chief Strategy Officer, Rhonda Hyatt, about the ways in which we would need to be advising our clients as well about this exact issue, this pain point that they were all going to be facing. And from that grew the idea of our next thought piece, really, or our next point of view on the world, which was from chaos to clarity. And so what I'm going to talk to you today about is a bit about the methodology, about what we did and why we did it. I'm going to talk to you about how chaos actually undermines growth. And then we're going to talk a little bit about how marketing is in an amazing position now to really harness that chaos to drive growth within your businesses. We're going to talk a lot about the opportunity that's at stake for marketing right now and the benefit that code has had on your specific roles within your businesses. So this is the question that sits underneath it all. And it's the question that struck me on the 23rd of March. In a chaotic, complex environment, how can we really find a way to access growth in a really efficient, effective, and fast-moving way when we're all running at 1,000,000 miles an hour to try to keep up? And how do we stop that just being entirely tactical? How many of you spent the entire year in 2020 just doing tactical stuff? Ooh, less keen hands, but they're all there. How many of you actually got time to do strategy work? Oh, a few. Well done. Either you're very senior and have massive teams, or you were thoughtful and you'd worked out what the right thing to do was. So we were sort of working out, well, if it's really chaotic and if there's lots of challenge in the world, does marketing really have the seat at the boardroom table to actually do something about it? How many of you know this sort of apocryphal thing that keeps doing the rounds, that the CMO is 80% of CEOs don't trust their CMO? Anyone know that sort of stat that kicks around? I'm not sure it's real anymore, but everyone says it all the time. So we decided to test that out. We decided to go out to market and speak to 700 CEOs, CMOs, and senior marketing leaders from across multiple industries to understand how COVID had affected the way in which marketing was being seen within the boardroom, and in specific terms by the chief executive. And so we spoke to FTSE 100 companies, S&P 500 companies, we spoke to people from the French bourse all around the world to understand their perspective on the value of marketing and how that had shifted. But before we did that, we decided to have a look at the shape of the chaos. Because if you remember what I said at the beginning, COVID isn't the only chaos that we've all been trained to deal with. And actually, our hypothesis was marketing actually has the best opportunity to shape chaos on behalf of its business, to drive strategy on behalf of its business. And that wasn't well recognized by other members of the boardroom because of that horrible stat that kicks around. But actually, how many of you have had to engage with your IT teams in the last couple of weeks? Lots of you. How many of you had to engage with finance? How many of you had to engage on the customer experience and with the customer contact teams? Do you see my point? We speak every single language of the business that's important for growth. And yet, we're not well recognized for that. We're seen as the colouring in department far, far too often, right? That's not a good thing. But what was really interesting is as you start to define the shape of chaos, you see the type of marketer that is starting to form in the new modern world. We're all starting to operate in the intersections between things rather than within our silo. We are the first really cross-functional, non-siloed part of the Excode. And you should take that back because you should be using that to force decisions at strategic level within your businesses. And the reason is you understand brand and audience because you understand the customer. You understand product and experience because you have to in order to sell it. You understand infrastructure and ecosystem because if you don't have a very good marketing tech stack and you're probably not going to be long in your job. So fundamentally, we understand lots of different levers in the business, and yet we're not getting the credit for it. And that's just internally. There's a load of external complexity that we're really good at dealing with as well. The experience revolution. How many of you have had to work out customer experience stuff in the last 24, 18 months? Yeah, lots of hands again. This is very easy. How many of you had to deal with this increased inequality thing? This issue with split spend, increased challenge with sort of money being isolated in different pockets of different parts of the market, which makes it more difficult to access for you, much more difficult for you to do mass work. You have to be much more targeted. And how many of you are also worried about continued disruption? The ongoing nonsense that will continue, not just in the UK, but right around the world, from supply chain, through ESG, through changing customer behaviours, through the advent of another new channel like TikTok. We deal with chaos externally and internally all the damn time. So some good news. CEOs are behind you for the first time. 89% of CMOs claim to have a lot of control, but most importantly, CMOs now state that marketing is the second most influential role in the boardroom. That's a huge shift. It's also temporary if we're not careful, because we have to double down on that. The role that's more important, anyone guess? There you go. So that connectivity between you and finance and the CEO now needs to be the thing that you focus on. Wherever you are in your career, however senior you are, however junior you are, building those bridges is so important. I'm now going to talk a little bit about how chaos goes on to undermine the growth that we're all targeting. So whilst this is good news, there's a lot in our way. So chaos undermines growth in a lot of different ways, but I'm going to focus on three major things that's affecting us. So firstly, we're having a bit of an identity crisis. Because of all of the things that we're good at, and because of the sort of the breadth of our role these days, it's difficult to understand where we should focus. I know people hate the word prioritize because it suggests it's the enemy of actual growth. But if you start to think of it as being more choiceful about where you invest your time, I know it's splitting hairs, but still, this is the most important job that you have to do. It's working out how you can focus on the right elements of your role and on the right elements of your budget for the most bang for your buck. The second part, and this is unfair, because this was data taken in the middle of a pandemic when all we were doing was being tactical, but historically there has been too much focus on the tactical at the expense of the strategic. Too much focus on quarterly numbers versus outperforming in 3 years' time. There's an opportunity to change that record. And third, how many of you are struggling to hire up into your teams? Me. God, it's hard. Talent is expensive. Talent is difficult to find. It is a seller's market. And we're really struggling at this point to actually get the right people into the teams for the future of our marketing functions. So how many of you are trying to redesign your marketing function whilst the wheels are still spinning? How many of you have realized that you haven't yet got the skill sets internally to speak all of those languages that we talked about earlier, to actually access the opportunities that you've brilliantly identified in your strategy? This is a hard job, and it's getting harder. So let's have a look at that perception piece, that identity crisis. So that first issue is really interesting. Fundamentally, what are we for? Now, are we about building brand? Are we about driving strategy and delivering a different way of creating growth, or are we just executional? How many of you feel like at the moment you're seen as executional, but would like to be more strategic? A few hands, a few honest hands, good. Because I think that's the challenge. But there is that shift. Because historically, you might have been seen as being that legacy kind of executional department, particularly if you worked in financial services, bloody awful place. You're not just executional anymore because of all of that access you have to that information. And because the challenge now is to articulate the value of that data and information back to senior leaders you're spending a lot more of your time, I would hazard a guess, at creating internal presentations to justify why you're making decisions. Because you're having to corral lots of different data sets into a point of view that makes a difference, that gets you more budget to access the thing that you'd realized months ago. That's hard. The good news, though, is that CMOs that we talk to actually see this as being part of their role these days. They see it as part of their reason for existence. They are growth drivers within their business, and they feel empowered. And by the fact that they have access to all of the data and all of the insight about customers, they have some of the tools that they need. But interestingly, if you look at these perceptions on here, we've still got that lag. Lots of people still see us as the creative department, which is the big yellow bar on the left. So there's still a job to be done in terms of persuading your leaders, despite the fact that they see you as owners of the data, a strategic growth driver, and brand activators. You've still got a job to do. There's also an issue with CEOs wanting to have their cake and eat it too, because they want you to be growth for new products and services, but they also want you to grow by accessing new customers, and they also want you to grow by increasing market share and all of the other bits and pieces. And what they fundamentally don't necessarily understand is that some of those things compete with each other in the way that you manage your budgets and structure your strategies. So if you don't have that clear role, and if you haven't articulated to your chief exec and the exco that the reason and the way in which we're going to hit our commercial goals is not through market share growth, because there's no value in market share growth for this business, for our business. For us, it's accessing new markets through new products and services, or it's about saying, well, actually, we've got two options. We can either access and grow through all market share by acquiring new companies and building out our platform with, and becoming, in effect, a monopoly as much as we can, or we can take a different route and be more focused, be more bespoke, be more specific to needs. And often, they don't see the difference. They just want growth. They just want revenue. But it is a big opportunity because you've got a unique perspective, so you can start to guide them on where you're going to go next. You can start to get involved in the commercial strategic conversations. Instead of being somebody that has the 3 to 5 year plan delivered from commercial strategy and finance, you're the person who's in the room helping guide that with them to work out where you're going to go next as a business and proving to them that there's a business case for the reasons that you want to invest in these different areas. You've got more power than you think. You've just got to access it. This is a fascinating slide. I presented this a couple of weeks ago. And so the yellow bar is what CEOs want. Sales, profit, customer lifetime value, margin enhancement, leads. What marketing thinks they should be focusing on is market share growth, customer satisfaction, brand awareness, and cost per lead and cost per acquisition reduction. What's the linkage? You can't do what the CEO wants without doing what the CMO wants. But the issue is that conversation isn't happening. CMOs aren't saying, look, we have to do all of those different things. We have to articulate the value of doing those different things because they get us to revenue growth. They get us to profit growth by being more efficient in the way that we manage our money. It's a change of conversation. The other thing I think we see is the fact that CEOs are saying all of these lovely things, but then they're turning to you and saying, still need you to hit that monthly target. Still need you to hit that quarterly target that we've put in front of you, because if you don't, well, you might not be enrolled for very long. There is that horrible thing as well. You know, CMOs who've been enrolled for 18 to 21 months are twice as likely to be fired as CEOs who've been enrolled for 21 months or longer. And why is that? Because after 21 months, you might have actually had a chance to build your team and, you know, reorganize things and put your strategy into play and maybe have some budget allocated to the stuff you actually want, because, you know, you joined halfway through a financial year and you didn't have all the levers that you needed to pull. So there's a bunch of stuff here that's hidden. But there is something that we're not doing particularly well, which is that we are starting to focus too much on the tactical. We're getting caught up in the day-to-day chaos rather than focusing on the long-term chaos. We're focusing on, oh God, there's a new technology I've got to get across, because if I don't, somebody else will and I'll be in trouble. There's a new media channel that I've got to really have done. I don't know if you've seen The Marketunist. He does a lovely cartoon. He partnered with us on this, actually. You'll see in a second. But he did a lovely cartoon about strategies for different new media channels. And it was a person walking past the CEO's office, and the CEO shouts out the door, have we got a TikTok strategy? We're in B2B chemicals. Not entirely sure oh, right. And the final issue is the talent issue. And there's talent issues at both ends, because unfortunately there's a talent drain at the senior level of the profession. Less than 20% of you actually want the CMO job, probably because of the 18-20-month thing that I said earlier, but also probably because there is a perception in the industry that we're not as powerful as we actually are, and that we're not as influential as we actually are in the boardroom, and actually it looks like a really difficult job where you have to speak so many different languages and build so many bridges, often that get immediately burnt down by the person at the other end. It's hard, so why would you want it? But then there's the other end of the scale. The other end of the scale is that we're struggling to bring talent in. We're being pinched at both ends. Kids struggle to access this sector, understand the potential of this sector. There's still that perception lag out in the market that marketing is a silly career that people shouldn't do. I mean, my mum said to me, "You're going into marketing? Oh, what a waste." I went, "Thanks. That's great, Mum. Thanks very much. Way to give me the pep talk." Anyway, but that was the perception. I mean, my mum is 73. She grew up in ICI, Imperial Chemical Industries. She grew up in a sales culture where sales was the thing, and marketing was just seen as colouring in and leaflets. The world has changed, but actually the perception lag is still there. And I'm going to leave a couple of points to our friend Mark Evans, the Managing Director of Marketing and Digital at Direct Line. He's going to talk for about a minute about the real issues that we have at the sort of the junior end of the pipe, but also about things that we should be doing about it.
For many people, they don't really know what marketing is all about, don't know how to get in. It's been described as a very closed sector. And even more so for young people today, and particularly from people from a more diverse background. And I've just got a couple of stats which says that it's expected that by the end of this year, unemployment for 18 to 29-year-olds is going to hit 17%, which hasn't been seen since 1984. But I think it's just a hard industry for people to understand where they might fit, how to get work experience, and even to understand what marketing is. And of course, the reality is, we all know, everyone on this will know, it's a brilliant career. It's a career which thrives during volatility. It's a career where you're bringing the outside in and the future forward. So there's this huge gap between the possibility of having amazing careers and the fact that it's hard and getting harder to get into.
Anyone chime with that? Anyone have kids who are thinking about professions? That's the issue we're facing. It's that we haven't made it easy enough for people to understand the complexity and the brilliance of this career. It's interesting, agencies like, so our company M&C Saatchi, we've started running something called Open House. An open house is, as it would appear on the tin, an open way to understand the different functions within the agency landscape. So what is brand strategy? What is performance marketing? Very simple stuff for people who haven't done a marketing degree but are interested in marketing as a career. We've had 2,500 kids from across the world, from Cairo to Nairobi to New York, sign up to come to these virtual sessions. It has been fabulous, and we've taken it further by offering them internships, and 10 of the 50 that we take on for interns become full-time staff. It's a small piece that we're doing, and lots of other agencies are doing it. I don't see as much of that happening within marketing organisations across the UK. So I'm going to challenge you, in a very friendly way, to think that through. Do more to bring talent through into this business, because it is a brilliant business to be in. It's a brilliant function to be part of, because they will be the people who will change business for the better. It won't be the people in sales or finance. It will be the people in marketing who change the message and who make growth in a different way, in a more environmentally and socially and governance responsible way. For those of you who are expecting ESG, it's in, who had it on the bingo card. We're the only business within business that can do this well. So let's talk about how you do it, because otherwise I wouldn't be actually selling you anything, I'd just be saying lovely things. So harnessing chaos for growth, it's worth saying, Clear is the growth strategy consultancy arm of M&C Saatchi. Our job fundamentally is to help people like you find ways to access growth in ways that you haven't thought of yet, or ways that you have thought of yet but find difficult to access because you don't have the information, the data, the insight, or the support strategically to get it done. And I'm going to show you some models. I'll focus on the middle model in a second, but firstly we have something very simple called the forces model. And the forces model is different, and you won't be able to see that properly, so I'll walk you through it. So it's both external and internal. How many of you have got an external things that are going to affect my life model? And how many of you have an internal one? Less of you. You have to have both. Because if you get your ducks in a row on all the external challenges that you're facing, if you go, do you know what? I know, because I'm in the automotive space, that we've got really significant issues short-term with silicon manufacture, medium-term with battery manufacture, and long-term with EV architecture and infrastructure and whether we choose to back hydrogen over EV. But I haven't really mapped the internal things that are getting in the way of any of those things coming to fruition within my particular business. Have I talked to engineering? Do I understand the 7-year product cycle that's coming through and how they've thought that through? Do we have any sort of alignment between customer needs that we are predicting will appear in the market and actual needs that are being designed into products right now? And that's not just automotive, that's financial services, that's all sorts of other areas. If you're in financial services, everybody's focused on digital customer experience because you've had to. But you're all going to end up with the same customer experience if you're in banking. You're all going to end up as a utility. Sorry if that's new news. So if you don't think carefully about how you inject new ways to find revenues within your digital experience, if you don't start stopping giving away the farm every time you create a new widget and a new way of accessing new services digitally, you're going to find yourself in the situation of one of your various utilities, and you won't have any other option than to go for market share to make any sort of money. So there are some fundamental external things you have to work out, but then you have to work out actually on a strategy point of view, on a capability point of view, is my team designed and is the organization designed for this? And then on experience delivery, is my front end designed and will it be designed in 10 years' time to deliver these things that it needs to deliver? So once you've mapped all of those and you've got, oh Christ, there's a lot, I'm in a lot of trouble and I have no idea where to go first, that's when this model comes in. And I drew this on the back of a napkin in my child's bedroom on March 24th, 2020. Literally the day after Damien had said, we need a new strategy. And on it is, there's 2 axes. One is now versus next, i.e., is it really important that I do this today? Or can I leave this until 2050? So your net zero strategy is probably over there. Then my ability to influence. So is my business capable of influencing this? And be really careful with this. Not, would we like to? Well, if we make a few changes, we might be able to. But actually, can I? Do I have a right to play in this space? And then the size of the bubbles is, how much money can I make? I'm not allowed to quote David Ogilvy from a contractual basis because I work for M&C Saatchi, but I will quote David Ogilvy. We sell or else. That's fundamentally what we do. We create growth, we create opportunity. And right now, coming out of a pandemic where the market needs us, that's what we have to use to focus. So once you've worked out what you're doing first, in your quick wins, your strategic moves, and then your transformative bets, you then say, well, actually, how do I access those? And what are they? So a quick win, reset quickly to take advantage of unexpected change right in front of you, COVID. Strategic moves, really bold decisions in the medium term that are in your pipeline, but you're just going to upweight because you now know that they are more influential and have more value to you and can give you competitive advantage. And then transformative bets are hard because it's really easy to just kick them down the road. But let me give you 2 examples. 2 examples of transformative bets. So transformative bet number 1, Pfizer, late 90s. Somebody at Pfizer goes, I reckon we should invest in mRNA technology. It's going to be the future of vaccines. Everyone goes, all right, we'll see whether that's worth backing. Who's the only famous and well-regarded pharma company in the world because of that being first to that vaccine? If you talk to consumers, who's the one pharma company they can name? Pfizer. That value is unbelievable, and it's all based on a bet they made decades ago. So just be aware that you might have some of those hiding in your back catalogue of things you need to think about and start planning for. And even if it's not your direct responsibility as marketing to actually make those things happen, you need to be highlighting some of those things to your colleagues in R&D, to your colleagues in development, to your colleagues in strategy to say, well, actually, if we invest in this now, we might just outperform the market in 5 years' time. And it'll do 2 things. 1, it'll make them realize that you think beyond the next quarter. And 2, it'll change their perception of how marketing adds value. We use this ourselves. We use this in our strategy sessions every single year for the past 2 years. And it has made us a better business. It has driven our own growth within M&C Saatchi, and we use it for not just Clear, but for the entire group to help the group decide where it should invest next. We've changed the group strategy, we've changed our own strategy, and it is paying off in spades. Start to work in this way. Start to think about the future and not necessarily about the immediate past. So, 3 quick lessons. 1, seize the moment. If you take nothing away from today, get in front of your senior leaders, take value to them when you do, and demonstrate that you're thinking beyond the next week, the next month, the next quarter, and start to push them to think differently about how they can build a stronger business with you rather than handing you things to do once they've already made those decisions. Know where you're headed, but roll with it. We have worked extensively with businesses who've said to us, we had this great strategy and then this thing happened in March and now we don't have a strategy anymore that works or fits or allows us to do what we need to do. So we've increasingly been doing work with people to do scenario planning and creating adaptive strategies where you can parallel 2 or 3 or even 4 different potential strategies from the beginning of the year on a quarterly basis, review where you're at, and then decide to shift gears based on the context around you in the market and how well that strategy is playing out for you. And thirdly, bridge the gaps. Bridge the gaps between teams. So I'm just going to leave you with a couple of quotes from CMOs that we've spoken to in the last few years about this. So seize the moment. Craig Welch, who is from Euromoney, who I know are in the room, he appeared on a panel for us, I think in April. And I love this. I love this because it's the best distillation of kind of what I've been saying to you. It took a pandemic for us to get the opportunity, and what we've asked to be, part of the strategy, a driver of change. We've always wanted that. And now CEOs are saying, we need your help. But don't think it's going to stay. Don't just assume because it's here now that it's going to stick around. It might get taken away unless we can really show that we can continually drive value within our businesses. Second one, know where you're headed, but roll with the waves. I love this because I don't know the song, but Pam's American, so it's fine. There's an old song, you don't paddle against the current. I'm going to take this on record from Pam. You paddle with it. And if you get good at it, you throw away the oars. Now, I'm not sure any of us managed to throw away the oars in the middle of COVID, but we did get better at knowing where the waves were. I love this, where the waves were and how we could pivot and move and flow between them along the way. Be more flexible, fundamentally. And then bridge the gaps. This is a lovely quote from Andrea Linehan. If you've not met Andrea, she is an Irish force of nature. She's the CMO of Currency Fair, who've just, I think they've just bought out one of their rivals and grown and done all sorts of, she's great. Definitely one to have on your list of people that I should bring in to inspire and inform my own marketing team, by the way. And she says, I love the revenue piece. I think it's our strongest force for having a seat at the table. Let's really own the power and influence that numbers in our hands have over the business. Learn to be able to talk about them and get the CMO, CEO, and CFO to have that conversation together. Andrew's taken it one step further. She, in night school, through COVID, became a chartered accountant so that she could have that conversation one-on-one with the chief exec and the CFO and not be blindsided by information and finance data that she wasn't comfortable with. She's terrifying, but she's lovely. So we've seen that we wear many hats. We see that we straddle brand, product, infrastructure, all sorts of other bits and pieces. It brings massive challenges and complications, but it also brings enormous opportunity. And what our job at Clear is to help you find the clarity to navigate through that. It's about saying, actually, there's all of this confusing chaos, but there is a route that we can plot, and there is a pathway here. In fact, there are 3 or 4 that our business could take. But which is the right one? Which is the one that's going to generate the most impact? That's going to make us the people that people listen to inside our business because we're making our business better, because we're growing our business, because we're helping more people have jobs, and fundamentally building a better economy. Thank you very much.